So I'm just going to quickly introduce myself as your moderator today. We're not really here to talk about me, so I'm going to keep this very brief, but my name is Alex Bell. I am the Chief Strategy Officer here at Uptima. I am ever grateful for those of you who are an ally to somebody in service or a veteran currently in service. Thank you so much, all of you, for your service. I'd like to give a couple hours of my time every month to supporting these types of events. So if you are new to the Fireside and you haven't been here before, my role in this is to be the moderator. So I'll really be guiding the conversation, making sure that you get to know everybody here and that we're touching on some good takeaways, that you have a great support platform to move on with from your time in Fireside. For those of you who have spent time in Fireside with us previously, hi all, it's nice to have you back again. So I'm originally from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I currently live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a long way from home. Don't miss the weather. I've been working in the Salesforce ecosystem now for about 20 years. My background is in finance and accounting, and I have been at Uptima now for just over 4 years and loving my time here. So I'm joined on the line today by Bree Hinsey. She is our Director of Marketing here at Uptima. Simone Daniels, who is one of our marketing coordinators. She is also here with us at Uptima. Tori Warks, who works in HR here. She's our HR lead. Scott Hutchison, who is one of our project managers. And then we're joined by both customer and partner representation. So Kevin Walker, who is president and CEO at Duquesne Light, who's one of our very dear customers to us here at Uptima. And then also Sterling Showalter, who is a business development account executive at Zilliant, one of our partners. So I'm just going to say that and hand over to you all to do your intros. So Kevin, why don't we start with you? Thank you so much for taking some time with us today. Would love to hear about your background, how you made your transition into your civilian life, and some of the things that you tap into from your time in service or your experience, with the U.S. military and how that has propelled your professional career. It's very impressive to hold a title of president and CEO. CEO. So we'd love to hear more about, your journey and how you leveraged those skill sets earned very bravely.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Alex. And hello, everyone. And thanks for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here. Like Alex mentioned, Kevin Walker, I'm the president and CEO of Duquesne Light. Duquesne Light is an electric utility provider to the Pittsburgh region. We have about 600,000 customers. We also have a couple of unregulated businesses. I mean, that's the core of our business, but we also have a communications business that does fiber optic communication. And we have an energy efficiency business called 10 that delivers energy efficiency to customers actually throughout the US, not just in Pittsburgh. So really interesting business. I've been in this career since 1991 when I got out of the military. I'm a West Point graduate, and so I had a 5-year commitment when I graduated from West Point and served first in, I'm an artilleryman, so I spent some time a lot in Oklahoma. We were talking about Mears and other places that are in Oklahoma that I've spent some time at. But the first assignment I had was in Europe, in Germany, a small town called Augsburg, and it was a great experience. I don't remember all the work I did there, although I did a lot of work, but I do remember the beer fest and all of the other great things that were going on in Germany at the time. And then I decided I'd get a real military role and went to 82nd in Fort Bragg in North Carolina and wound up being deployed to the first Gulf War from that location. And then when I got out of the military in 91, I came to work for the utility business, and I've worked for 6 different utilities now, which is kind of unique in our space. Usually people go to 1 or maybe 2 and they stay there for their whole career. Started off in Con Edison in New York City. I went to Northeast Utilities up in New Hampshire, went to AEP in Columbus, Ohio. I went to Iberdrola, a Spanish energy company that bought operations in Rochester, New York. I went to Southern California Edison out in the LA area, and then now I'm in Pittsburgh. So I've been around a lot and really leveraged the military experience I've had every step of the way. things that we think about, and many of us can acknowledge, is military folks are dedicated, are driven, are committed, willing to make sacrifices, good team players, critical thinkers. When I was on the battlefield, I didn't worry too much about the stuff that could hurt me. I was focused on the things that could kill me. And those are the things that you need to be able to use in your civilian sector as well. So I think we're uniquely positioned with a military ethos to come into the civilian sector and be very successful. The one thing I say that we do have to moderate a bit is to dial back on the edge that we bring to the table. Oftentimes, that's a strength in the military sector. It still can be a strength in the civilian sector, just dial back just a bit. Sometimes our intensity and that edge can be overwhelming for other people who haven't had that experience. So that's just kind of one over the world, my experience, and hopefully I struck the right summary that you asked for, Alex.
Yeah, no, you did. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Okay.
All right. So Sterling, let's head over to you for your introduction. Of course, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your service. So would love to hear about your background, your time in the Army. One of the things that I will say is that we see a lot, working with our partners, whether it be Zilliant, Salesforce, DocuSign, you name it. We come across a lot of folks in sales who have a military background. And what's interesting, and I want to just touch on something that Kevin mentioned, is there's, what folks from service really bring as a really strong skill set into their professional lives is the concept of the mission and the team, right? And in sales, one of our jobs is to be kind of a master delegator, really driving the team forward. So tell us a bit about your time in service. If that lands with you, I'd love to hear about how you leverage that today in your current role, working as an account director at Zilliant, very exciting company. Tell us about Zilliant as well, because I think this is it's really cool what y'all are doing. But yeah, talk about some of that for us.
Well, yeah, absolutely, Alex. Thanks for setting the stage there. I want to touch on something that Kevin just said, which is kind of rounding off that edge. That is something that I struggled with early on in my civilian career coming out. Was like I came in with like too much of an intensity, and actually got me in a little bit of trouble early on in my career. So that is a great point. So Sterling Showalter, I'm located out of Austin, Texas. I work for Zilliant. I'm a sales director there. Run enterprise sales for the West Coast, essentially. For what we call the West Coast is anything Texas and West, right? So my military background, I'm also, like Kevin, a graduate of West Point, graduated in 2008. Went into the Army as a tanker, so armor, tanks, etc. And then actually was a scout platoon leader. So just think, instead of tanks, just you're kind of walking around, right? And you're basically become like the infantry, was my skill set. Was at Fort Hood, Texas, which is now Fort Cavazos. Down here in outside of Killeen, deployed to Mosul, Iraq in 2009, and got out of service in 2013. My transition into my civilian career was a little bit bumpy. So it was about 6-7 year journey trying to figure out where I actually fit and what I actually wanted to do, right? And the number one thing that I would tell people as they're transitioning out is don't feel rushed, right? Take a broad lens. There's so many things to look out there in terms of different businesses and verticals, etc. And it might not always align with the fulfillment that you got from service. So if you're struggling to find that fulfillment from service, right? Find something, a new hobby or ways to give back that can fulfill that need, because you might not always get that in your civilian career, right? And one of the things that have driven me into the sales role is just being execution oriented. And I think that's something that you take from the military, and sales is very execution oriented, right? You're not doing a lot of strategy work. You're not looking at a big ecosystem. You're trying to take a deal to close, right? And provide that value. And there's certain tasks along the way, and really driving that, driving different stakeholders to understand the value to an execution oriented task. So I work at Zilliant. What does Zilliant do? We're in the Salesforce ecosystem, right? And we provide price optimization to majority of B2B manufacturing and distribution companies. So if anybody out there is like an Excel nerd and loves pricing, I'm the guy to talk to. So come talk to me.
Yes, you mentioned the words Excel nerd, so I immediately thought of our CEO here at Uptima, Adam Menzies. I frequently reference Excel and the enjoyment that it brings him. Certainly more enjoyment than I bring him. So we'll just rest with that. Okay, so Tori, perhaps could segue to you. Tori is an HR lead here at Uptima. So Tori, you have a really interesting background and very relevant to your civilian life, right? And it sounds like in talking to you, you planned that. You said, you picked a career during your time in service that would be very translatable into the real world. So tell us about that, because you and I talked about this when I was up in Pittsburgh a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, oh yeah, because normally when I'm talking to people who have spent some time in service, they sort of haphazardly find themselves in a role, right? Like there's some translatable and transferable skills, but it's not like one for one. And I feel like you did that really well.
So yeah, I was staff sergeant in the Pennsylvania Air National Guard. That's the 171st here. So when I enlisted, I was like older. I wanted active duty, but I just went with Guard instead. So I was older. So I was looking more towards the future. I needed a career that I would be able to do outside of the military, since the Guard technically is only that one weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. So I picked personnel. I started working in the customer service section, and then I actually got a full-time position. Well, it was a temp full-time position for 3.5 years on base. And I worked with all the deployments. So the whole entire time I was in the military, my job was customer service, whether it was onboarding those people to join the military or onboarding them to leave. And then how was I transitioning them from offboarding and to get out, or offboarding to get back into the civilian life that they lived before they went on that deployment. So while I was in, I actually got credits for personnel. So as an HR major, so I went to school at Point Park and I got my bachelor's in human resources management. That way I could find something on that civilian side. I was able to, the hardest part was relating my resume. That was the most difficult thing, was finding how can I explain what I did in the military to what I did in the United, or like what I'm doing in HR. That was the hardest part, because the systems have so many different names and so difficult to explain. But yeah, that's a little about me.
No, fantastic. I think that's a really good overview. So Bree, I'm just going to head over to you. And I would like to just mention that Bree is a military spouse. Her husband is currently deployed. She has 3 young kids, one of them who I very fondly and lovingly refer to as Muffin, and Muffin alone. And we have spent some time together on Google Meet, Google talking to your kids, playing games. We played trivia. But this is where, I talk about our military spouses being some of the most powerful allies to our military and our service members. So with Bree, she's managing an incredibly busy role here at Uptima. If any of you make your way to Dreamforce, please do come see us and spend some time with us. And you'll see that Bree really wins Dreamforce. She does. I mean, the amount of time and effort and planning and creativity that goes into these big events, we all get to enjoy the output of it, paired with basically solo parenting right now, while Alan is deployed. So Bree, I know that there's the trials and tribulations of this, but you allowing Alan the ability to do that is just incredibly brave in and of itself. I'm not sure that I would fare as well as you. You're a far stronger woman than I am. But one thing that we know of you at Uptima is your incredible amount of grit and resilience. And I know that it's earned through a lot of what you're experiencing right now. I also know that Uptima, working in an organization like Uptima, has afforded you the ability to have your own professional identity, right? Build your career alongside of your husband's. I'd love for you to tell us more about that, because if there's a lot of people here who are repeat attendees, so we know a lot about you already, and you're the face of these events, and you're one of our major faces in terms of our alliances to all of our military programs. But tell us a bit about, how you're digging deep, you're doing the good work. What is it that helps you stay very focused while you have a deployed husband, you're single parenting, and you're planning Dreamforce? These are very, very tough things.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for all the kind words. I'm getting very uncomfortable. So I'll start talking now so I can just move through that. So thank you for all the kindness and all the support here. I've been at Uptima 2 years, and this really has been my first career as a military spouse. And when I was entering the workforce after a career break, after having kids and exploring some less traditional careers, I had a background in marketing, and when my husband had joined, I'd taken a break from it. And what I've learned, with our topics today of like speaking civilian and experiencing this grit, I think sometimes we can feel inadequate, or are we able to handle something? It's always these huge trials come to our lives. Is it deployment? Are you the one being deployed? We're in the middle of summer, and I knew I was going to have 3 kids at home while working and trying to get through the thick of it all. But I just learned that, we have to take things a day at a time. I really loved what Kevin had said about focusing on what doesn't kill me. I personally relate to that right now, because I'm like, yes, we didn't die today. This is a huge win. So celebrating whatever we can. I had another fantastic conversation with Jay, who's a veteran here at Uptima, just the other day, and he was talking about giving ourselves enough credit for what we do. I think I've noticed this about our military community, and I think I'm guilty of it myself, is we don't, you get the thing done. Of course you did. That was the mission. That's what you were supposed to do. But taking a minute to recognize that, I'm not perfect at that. I'm still working on it, but taking a minute to recognize, hey, this was something that was hard and it was a challenge, giving myself confidence in knowing if I could survive that, if I could overcome that obstacle or that difficulty, gives me confidence in encountering the next one. So far, no one has died in my, in our deployment or in our difficulties. We've made it through these other challenges. We can get through another one. And I think bit by bit, it just does. I think grit is something that can start, and it just gets strengthened over time by going through whatever hardships we've been going through. So they aren't easy. There are definitely hard moments, but every day that we get through it is something to look back on and feel so proud of. It is, survival is really hard sometimes. And that of itself gives me some energy that, okay, we've made it this far. We can take it into the unknown.
Yes. No one died today. Muffin is alive.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So Simone, you are new in terms of having your face on panel today. You've been around for our last few firesides, but I think limelighting is Bree via the picture. So we've got this issue with our Zoom webinar. For whatever reason, if you go off camera and you're a panelist, you become Bree. So if we could clone Bree this many times over, we would gladly do it. All right. So Simone, you're reasonably new to Uptima. You've been around for, I think, just a little bit under a year now. Is that right? Do I have that right?
I started at the HOH fellowship in
yes. Yep. So
I don't know.
yes, I know. And well, many of you, Scott, you joined through some of these military affiliate programs, which we're going to talk about next shortly. But so Simone, you work on the marketing team with Bree, earning your stripes, winning Dreamforce, because it is a stripe winner. You are expecting your next child. You have others at home. You are a military spouse. So you've got a lot going on too, right? And you're able to maintain this career alongside of your husband while expecting another child shortly. I think that in many ways, one of the Salesforce ecosystem has such this incredible way of giving back to military spouses and to the people that they're supporting who are currently in service, because we've got this great opportunity to have remote careers, right? Like I think about, especially during 2020, it really changed the landscape of how we work, right? A lot of us work behind a laptop now. We don't interact too much in person, especially in the consulting space. And I know that you've talked about how precious that has been for you, given the fact that your family's growing, you're a military spouse, you're not necessarily like located in a tech hub by any means, but you work for a tech company. So I would love to hear about your experience coming to Uptima, know some of the things that you have liked about working in the Salesforce ecosystem. Walk us through some of those things.
Yeah. So one thing I always like to share with people is my story of how I got introduced into Uptima. So I was in a networking call and I met with Katrina Wilson, and I was just talking with her, and she is here at Uptima. I was talking with her and trying to get her advice on, how do I present my skills? What do I say, what I want to do in this ecosystem? Because I wanted to do marketing, but I thought I was going to have to go to some admin or a developer role. And just by talking with her and saying that, she's like, oh, well, we have this role here at Uptima. I'll get you connected. And that's where she got me connected with Bree. But before that, I wasn't even going to mention that I wanted to do marketing. I was going to play that role that, oh, I'll go do this admin, or I'll do, a developer role for a couple of years before I can get my way into marketing. So I'm very thankful that I just happened to mention that to her and got introduced to Uptima. So that's kind of how I got introduced into basically who everyone is and everyone here. And I'm so thankful because I just feel like I've fit in so well here. But yes, being pregnant and being a military spouse and also in the reserves and planning Dreamforce, that was my first concern when they told me the due date. I was like, oh, a Dreamforce baby. Okay.
Yes, yes, a Dreamforce baby. Yes.
So yeah, I mean, as far as working here and being a spouse in the reserves, everyone's been thankfully very accommodating and supportive of my family growing and my role and the job. So that has always been helpful. And planning out our military journey, we're able to not be deployed for at least 2 years. So I have that secured, and that's good to know. But
yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm very happy for you and your family, and we are so excited for the expansion of your family. We'll miss you while you're gone, but you will be back in the saddle in no time. There you go. All right, Scott. So Scott, what I want to talk about with you is you came into Uptima through one of the military programs. And I think it's so important to make sure that we're talking often about those programs because there's so many of them out there, right? We have Veterati, Vets to PM, we have Salesforce Military Alliance. There's a lot of ways to get into organizations like Uptima, like Salesforce. The amount of organizations that are now affiliated with these military programs, because we love recruiting and hiring out of the military. You've heard Kevin and Sterling talk about some of the, I want to call it like core behaviors that come out of a time in service. And, you two talked about like dialing back intensity and stuff. I frankly love the intensity. I share that with you in spirit. I'm also a very intense person. I love it. I think there's a time and place for it, but it's absolutely something that we love. One thing that I notice of people like you and the roles that you're in here now, Scott, so Scott can tell you about how he came into Uptima and then now he's moved into a new role. But when we have individuals who spent time in service and now come into organizations like Uptima and sit in roles as like project managers, one thing that they're incredibly good at is seeing the points of failure. Like, where is this going to fail, right? That's something that becomes ingrained in individuals who have spent time in service. Is like, how is this going to fail? You know, how do I not get myself killed today? You know, to put it in Kevin's words, like, we need to survive the day. So Scott, tell us about the program that you were actively in when you came into Uptima, how you started at Uptima, and now the role that you're in today, and how your time in service really created quite fast, I would say, accelerated momentum for you here in Uptima, given the role that you started in and the role that you're now in. I mean, you definitely moved up quite quickly. So let's hear a bit about that.
Okay, great. So thanks, Alex. So yeah, I came to Uptima through the Vets to PM program, and that is a program that is, as you said, there are so many programs available. And I was in the National Guard myself, and I was finishing up a 20-year retirement because it's a little confusing to some people because the National Guard is part-time for most people. It's 1 week in a month, but there are about 10% of the people in the National Guard that are full-time. And those are the people that run the show, keep the lights on. And myself, I was in recruiting. So I was a full-time recruiter, and I was in recruiting in one capacity or another for about the last 16 years. I spent my first 4 years in the 82nd Airborne on active duty. And then I transferred, and I had a break in service as a civilian. But then after 9/11, I felt the need to come back in. So I came back in to the Guard, and I finished up 20 years of active duty service. And I found out about the Skill Bridge program. And they have several different options that you can, several different programs you can go through, and Vets to PM is one of those. So I came through the Vets to PM program, and that is where they allow you to do an internship. So you can do an internship your last 6 months with the military, and you can choose a company to do an internship with. And I was lucky enough to come to Uptima, and the military pays you, and you go to a company like Uptima, and you learn job skills to help you transition out of the military. And that's what I did here at Uptima. And I came into Uptima first into operations because I was the first Vets to PM intern they had here. So really we didn't have the program wasn't very well mapped out. So I came into operations, and then after about a year, I transitioned into project management. And the thing I found out was that the skills that you learn in the military are very difficult to translate into civilian skills on paper for most military people. You have no idea what those skills mean in civilian terms. But one of the most valuable resources that I found was Veterati. And if you don't know what Veterati is, I strongly urge the military people out there to look it up. And Veterati is a resource you can use where you access mentors, free of charge, of course, and you set up 30-minute or 1-hour calls with someone who has transitioned out of the military and is working in the civilian world, and they help you learn how to speak civilian. They're working in those jobs, they're working as project managers. And I had several mentors in Veterati that helped me to translate my skills into civilian language and learn what those skills were. But essentially, the skills that you have in the military, skills, you don't think of these skills as project management skills, but in the military, things that you do, such as even planning training. You have planned annual training, which essentially is a project. You're moving people a 2-week annual training that you plan in the summer for the National Guard is a project. You don't think of it in the military as a project, but it's essentially a project. There's a beginning, an end, and it has all of the elements of a project, but you just don't know how to put it in those words. Of course, the leadership skills, the people skills that you learn in the military, how to manage people, those are so valuable in the civilian world. You just don't get those when you're competing against people who have just gone from high school to college and have a bachelor's degree and they're heading out into the work world. The skills you have after even 6 years in the military of leading people, and especially leading soldiers, even, if you don't go into combat, but especially on combat tours, is just, there's no comparison to the skills that you have. So don't underestimate the skills that you have, the leadership skills that you have in the military. They're extremely valuable.
Yeah. No, I love that. You've touched on so many good points there. Now, Kevin and Sterling, I want to come back to you, and maybe we'll start with Kevin and then hand over to Sterling. But you both mentioned intensity and learning how to draw back on that. But certainly there's a balance to that, right? There's a time to fall back and there's a time to drive forward. Can you offer any coaching or advice? Because I'm sure that this is something that lands, right? This is something that really lands. Can you offer some advice on when to use critical thinking and how to use that thinking to know when it's the time to apply it and it's the time to really fall back? And Kevin, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, I think building on the military skills that we all gain, situational awareness is important, right? So understanding the culture you're in, understanding the people that you're integrating with, listening and learning what the vibe is and what the cadence of that organization or that exchange, even it could be down to the micro exchange, is really key. And we've already demonstrated that we can do that. Most of us came from an environment that was very different than the military, and we came in and we very much assessed and learned and were coached on how to shape into being a fierce fighting machine, and we did that very well. So it's not a skill we don't have. It's just that realizing that you're in a different environment and you have to do that and bring all those skills together to assess where you are. I give you an example. One of my places I worked, of those 6 I listed, was in a very rough and tumble environment. And so, I showed up as my authentic self, and people were saying, like, well, you're not tough enough. You need to push people harder. You need to do this kind of thing. And I thought, wow, I've never been accused of that before, but it was really interesting because that culture was all about like beating people up in a much more like theatric way, because at the end of the day, they were all friends and people were godparents to each other's kids, and they would be very abusive in a room, I thought, but then they would go home and have dinner together. So it was really interesting. And then I took the same person to another environment that was very much Midwestern nicety, and same person, and they're like, man, you're like really tough, you really got. So I wasn't reading the culture very well, but I knew how to do it. And once I picked that up, I built on the skills I learned from the military to be able to do that. So it's not a hard and fast like recipe, but it is about reading the room, understanding the micro situation, understanding a culture, and then seeing that feedback. So if you're pushing too hard and people start shrinking away, then like adjust and overcome, which is what we do very well.
Very good.
Yeah, that's great. I think for me, it was coming off as not being nice, right? And it was more of just my directness. And in the military, especially if you're coming out as an NCO or someone who is leading soldiers, or an officer, whatever, you give an order and you're direct and you expect it to be followed and you expect it to be immediate, right? And so my transition, coming out, was like, I was very direct, and it was more of, you're not nice, you're pissing people off. And there's 2 things that I found that really helped me. One was find a mentor that's going to give you candid, honest feedback, right? Yep. And if you can find that mentor that can give you that candid, honest feedback and internalize it, you can make the change. And for me, it was, he always told me, be nice and smile more.
Mm.
Right?
Mhm.
And once I started doing that, and the other piece of it was, you know, if you came out of the military and you're coming out of like combat situations,
Yes.
you know, you have an edge. And especially if say you lost soldiers, like I experienced like suicides in my platoon, right? And so
Mhm.
you carry that baggage with you, and you might carry that over into the civilian world.
Mhm.
And one of the big things for me was admitting the need to go get mental health help,
Mhm.
right? And that really helped me smile more, be
Mhm.
nice, and handle all that stuff that was behind me. You know, learning how to transition that baggage effectively,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And that was something I struggled with really for probably the first 6 years of coming out of the military in 2013. You know, I
Mhm.
moved around a lot, like kind of like Kevin was saying earlier. Like I was in Virginia, I was in North Carolina, I was in Dallas, I was in Fort Worth, I was in Kentucky. Like I was all over the place trying to find the right role. And you know, just back to the core, you know, so best practices, find that mentor that give you that candid, honest feedback.
Yep.
And if you need mental health help, the VA is excellent, right, at providing those resources.
Yeah. And thank you for just being very open about that. I think this is not a topic that should be taboo. There, especially for a civilian who has not spent time in combat duty, like I can't imagine some of the things that you experienced or
Yeah, it's Alex,
I think
you have to
but it
talk,
shouldn't be taboo, right?
you
It
have to talk about
shouldn't
it.
be a taboo topic. It's a fact of the matter. So thank you for being very direct about that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
now I want to continue the conversation with you and Kevin, and you know, Kevin, especially in your role, because you are a member of a leadership team, and certainly you make hiring decisions. Certainly you play a role in mentoring and managing other people. So as a civilian who sits in a role where I do make hiring decisions, I do manage people. When you are a civilian who is, um, I guess, managing or hiring somebody who's coming from service, we talk about things like intensity, or maybe somebody struggling with articulating how their skills are transferable. What are some things that people like I can do in my role to support the transition or to help coach and mentor where I don't have direct, relatable experience to spending time in service? So, what are some things that people like me can do to help foster that transition and to create a work environment where, you know, someone is able to be open and honest with me about some of the experiences that they've had, and you know how maybe I can be a better manager, taking into consideration in the best ways that I can the time that they spent in service.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with the dialogue. We started early on in my tenure here. We started a employee resource group called AVETS, and it's our Veterans Employee Resource Group. And this is where you put, you know, veterans and allies together so they can have that dialogue and get to understand each other better, and to ask those questions that you don't want to ask because it makes you feel like you're maybe not competent or not capable or somehow not getting it. And so taking down those barriers and allowing that dialogue to happen, it's been learnings on both sides, right? So allies, civilians who haven't had the experience are learning like what it actually has meant to serve in the military, even though they have a kind of a general picture from the movies, but they get to talk to a real live person who's contributed and is a patriot and done those things. While at the same time, the veteran gets to ask questions about like, you know, maybe it even goes to the mentoring place, but to say like, hey, how am I showing up? Like you were in that meeting with me, like, you know, did I come off too strong? Did I come off too, like, how do I moderate that? And so I think just pushing people together with the common interest of learning and helping each other be better is the best thing that allies can do. And I think both sides need each other. Allies need the veterans and the veterans need the allies. And once you recognize that, those opportunities will make themselves, in my mind.
Yeah, no, I love that's fantastic advice. Um, Sterling, what are your thoughts on that?
Man, it's really right in line with Kevin. If you have an ERG,
Mhm.
like where you're at, I mean, use it.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And to me, it's the biggest lesson learned for me is like, use your dang resources that are available to you. Right. Don't feel like you're trapped. Right. And then find that civilian mentor. Right. Who's going to tell you, and ask for the feedback. That's like my biggest lesson learned was like, I didn't ask for the feedback, because in the military, you get the feedback, right? They say, hey, here you go. Like, here's your review, and you get it, like you get your council statements, right? And you're always getting that feedback.
Yeah.
In the civilian world, like, you're not always getting that feedback, right? And maybe it's only once a year that if you do get it. So like my biggest thing is always like, ask for that feedback and internalize it. And don't be shy, and don't be ashamed if someone gives you a critical piece of like, hey, like, yeah, you came off a little strong, right? But from a hiring perspective, I think that was like the nexus of the original question. To me, I think of like military hiring in two kind of swim lanes, right? There's the folks like Tori, who had like an HR perspective, and actually the skill sets that she had translates into civilian world, right? There's also the swim lane of like, I was a scout, like I was walking around Mosul, right? Like that skill, there's not like a hard skill. There's a lot of soft skills, but not hard skill that like translate to that. Like, I'm not going to go be a rifleman in the civilian world, right? Unless you're going to go like be a policeman. So it's that's translating those soft skills that you learned into actual roles in the civilian world. That's why so often when I think we see sales folks, right? Because coming out of the military, like you're charismatic, you've spent time with other people, you can kind of herd the cats, right? And it's just from a hiring perspective, just if you don't have some of those hard skills, concentrate on your soft skills that you learned and translate those into roles that are in the civilian perspective.
Yeah.
That made sense. It was kind of all over the place, but
yeah, no, it's really good advice. At Uptima, we are represented now, I think 40 to 42% by veterans and military spouses. So, we have a very large team. And what I thought was very cool about Tori coming into our organization, especially the role that she's in, is that she has that direct experience, right? Like we are so abundantly represented here. And we have several people now in the right roles who I think are able to foster that. So I watch kind of the military culture almost emerging, or maybe it's already in place. Emerging might not be the right word, but it's in place at Uptima. And I definitely notice the camaraderie for those who are mil spouses and veterans. Like there's just such an immediate, it's almost an immediate respect for each other, aside from the banter about, what branch you're in, like, which I love the banter. But, so our vice president of customer success, he was in the Army, right? So we have really good representation in our leadership teams, but a lot of organizations don't, right? They haven't figured out that tapping into these military alliances is in the best interest of their organization, just because they don't know. That's the only reason. And so I want to make sure that we're giving that advice as well. So it's not just about, okay, hey, as someone making their transition, A, B, C, D, here's the things that you need to do. We're seeing increased representation from our servicemen and women in the civilian world. It's our job, and I believe that it's every person's job in this country, to learn how to support that transition, because without folks like you, we would not be afforded these very precious freedoms that we have, as a great honor and privilege here in this country. So I wanted to make sure that we talk about that. Not only just, it's not a one-sided coin here. This is a partnership, right? We really have to act as that partnership, the camaraderie. But I'm going to tap back into the intensity. So maybe not so much in like a gruffness or a not smiling thing, but what I see from folks in our company here at Uptima who are either military spouses or who are, are veterans or still in active duty, because we do have a couple people here who are in active duty. I like the intensity because it really like sets the pace on the mission. Like I actually very much appreciate it. It's definitely, one of our core behaviors here at Uptima that we promote and talk about all the time is grit, right? So that grit and the concept of failing fast, learning fast, and then driving forward with those lessons learned. I think that's also very important. We see a lot of the service representation here at Uptima master that. They come out of service and they've got that mastered already, because to Kevin's point, it's how do you not die, right? There's a lot of that thinking, and so that does translate. And I would recommend to those who are interviewing, making the roads to transitioning, or even trying to uplift their careers, to talk about that openly. I think that's a wonderful thing that you're able to bring to an organization. So tethered to that, especially here in the US, I know that we've got our sub-American cultures. So we talked about the Midwest, like typically folks from the Midwest are absolutely lovely. Then, we've got some other places in the country that are a bit more intense, and it's been a really fun experience for me learning all about US culture and US subculture as a Canadian coming to the US, and I frankly love it. But this is not something new to Americans, right? Americans, or people who live in the United States, typically take some type of enjoyment out of that intensity. So I agree with learning how to harness it, but at the same time, the concept of the mission and the team and the points of failure, being able to multitask your thinking that way comes with a level of an intensity that should be expected. All right, so let's move on. We're going to open it up in the webinar chat. We're going to continue our conversation here, but it's your turn to ask any questions. So if you've got some specific questions for any of the panelists here, please feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll keep our eye on it. So Scott, if you don't mind, I'd just like to come back to you and talk about, I want to spend a little bit more time talking about the programs, the affiliate programs, because these are incredibly powerful tools. And I think folks are sometimes a little bit intimidated to reach out and say, go to one of these affiliate programs and say, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. Like, how do I participate? Can you tell us how you got involved with Vets to PM? Like, what were the specific steps that you took? How did you get involved there? And then what was the experience like as you made the transition into Uptima through that program?
Sure. The first thing that I would like to say is that the Veterati program, I'm a mentor on Veterati, so
very good.
Anybody can reach out to me specifically. Be happy to talk to them about that. But the Vets to PM program, of course, you can just Google it, and they are more than happy to talk to you about that program. But essentially, within about a year of your ETS date, you can start applying for a skill bridge program. And there are several skill bridge providers. One of them is Vets to PM. And you sign up for Vets to PM, and you look, Vets to PM has several different, many different companies that they are signed up with, and the companies list jobs, internships that they want to have an intern with. And if you find some that you like and they work with you to match you up, you interview with these companies, and if they hire you, then you do an internship with them. And they really work with you. You don't have to do a whole lot, but contact them, and they will help you work through almost all the parts of it. You have to get with your command, and your command has to authorize it. And it seems like most of the time when I talk to people, about 2/3 of the commands will authorize it. Your command does not have to authorize it. And if they don't, there's not a lot you can do about it. So it's kind of up to them. But that's just one of many different, there are so many different programs I encourage you, if you're transitioning out, to just get out there. And I wore Google out. I began transitioning about 2 years out. I was so excited to get out of the military. And if you want to contact me on LinkedIn, I really feel like I know about almost every program there is when it comes to transitioning out, because I was so excited. I actually probably started about 5 years out. I used all of my education benefits that were available to me. I got 2 master's degrees, and they were both completely paid for by the military. I got my PMP certification paid for by the military. I utilized it for every single thing that I could find. And so there are so many that we can't even go into right now.
I
But-
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Scott, I want to second that piece there. Like, so the overarching theme of this is speaking civilian, right? One of the best ways that I found, and one of the things that really helped me, was I went to grad school. And when you go to grad school, or you go to college, you get your undergrad, whatever, you're surrounded by people who have not been in the military. And you just start to pick up on the different languages and things that they're saying, because, for me, I was at a military academy, and then I was in the Army, right? So I didn't know what the verbiage and the language and like what were the ways to act outside of the Army, right? So using resources like Service to School is a great resource, but they'll help you get your applications going and get you into your undergraduate or your graduate program. So just wanted to highlight Service to School. I found that as a great resource in terms of getting ready to speak that civilian language.
Good. So we do have a question. Oh, hey, Alan. Welcome. If you recognize the common last name here with Bree. Okay, so Alan would like to know, how have you all found to be effective ways of translating EPR, OPR into a resume or CV?
What's EPR, OPR? I'm not familiar.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I was hoping that you all knew.
I think it's a performance review, right?
Yeah,
The military performance review, I think.
Chat GPT.
Yeah, I would just say, like, as I've kind of grown from the military side into the civilian side, I think that there's 3 things that you have to be able to articulate on your resume. One is direct transferable skills. So if the job you're looking for is an engineer and you're an engineer in the military, direct transferable. Pilot, direct transferable. So like highlight those things for the job or family of jobs that you're looking for. The next piece is the things that are more soft skills, as like you see in the chat. So leadership, teaming, all that sort of stuff. You need to highlight that. The last piece that sometimes we forget is the aptitude to learn, because that's the building blocks of trying to figure out if you're going to be successful or not in the role. It's part what you bring that's identified and directly transferable. There's part about those rounding pieces that make you a good team member and a good leader. And then there's the things that, like, even if you don't have it, you have an aptitude and a desire to learn. If you can articulate that, and a proven track record of learning, right? I went into this new role, I didn't know anything about it. 6 months later, I was an expert. I mean, if you can articulate all those things, then I think you really position yourself well for any job, because any employer should be looking for all 3 of those things. And quite frankly, today they're shifting. It used to be all about the directly transferable skills. Now it's more about those softer skills and your aptitude.
Yes. No, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and if I could just piggyback off what Kevin says, it's very important to be specific to a job. Don't generalize and try to send a resume out over several jobs. It's very important to try to find a specific, to tailor your resume towards the job you're applying for. Very important.
Well, and the other thing that I want to comment on in terms of resumes is they're important. They're definitely a tool to leverage in the job hunt, but the most important thing is to make human connections. You know, when you're looking for a job, putting a resume, into a resume AI tool, like, unless you've got like very specific targeted words in there, which a lot of people don't know how to tailor a resume based on the job description they're seeing in front of them, even those with very applicable backgrounds to the role that they're applying for. it won't get you very far, right? So what's so important is to leverage your network, reach out to as many people as you can, and know that sometimes there's going to be your first or your second job in your career move that is your door opener, right? It's something to get your foot in the door somewhere, and that's okay. Everybody here has done that. Like everybody here has had their door opener, job, education, whatever it is. That's a very normal part of going through your career. So just keep that in mind, like reach out, make connections, go to events, engage in these military alliance programs, because you just never know who you're going to meet. And even if something doesn't sound entirely interesting or enticing to you, always be open to the conversation, because you just never know what's going to come out of a conversation. I do hold office hours every once in a while where we do, some interview coaching and things like that. And we talk about the importance of finding something in common with your audience, right? Find the thing that's in common, whether it's a food, a place, a point in time. That's how you really develop connections, and then finding a way to reciprocate, like the back scratching activity. Those are wonderful things to leverage in terms of soft skill development. And yes, Tori, please do say something about LinkedIn.
So I actually, fun fact, when I got hired with Uptima, I didn't even actually submit a resume. I didn't do anything. Lydia reached out to me because she saw my LinkedIn. So make sure your LinkedIn is updated. Make sure you're following people on LinkedIn. Everybody has so many resources on there. I didn't follow any of the programs, the military programs or anything. I honestly just made connections with people on LinkedIn, posted, hey, I'm a veteran, I'm looking for a career. And somehow Lydia found me some way, somehow, I'm not sure. But honestly, that is the best. Make sure your LinkedIn is updated, because that's what people are using now.
Awesome. All right. So we are at the top of the hour. I know that all of us have to carry on with our lives, but this has been a fantastic panel. Again, thank you everybody for your service. I don't think I can't express my gratitude enough. Kevin, Sterling, thank you for taking time out of your days, being fantastic partners over at Zilliant and a wonderful customer over at Duquesne Light. Thank you so much. For those of you joining us on the Uptima panel, I will see you soon. All right, everybody, take care. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.